Chapter 56. Nuwa, Rumble. The 10-foot giant coffin suddenly trembled and rose, and the surrounding sun-black-robed people knelt down as much as they could. The great brightness king god stared at the divine coffin in death. Within the divine coffin, a steep white mist erupted and wrapped the entire giant coffin. The rolling white mist churned and brought out a large amount of spiritual chi to gather in the surroundings. High in the air, countless cultivators maneuvered their cloud beasts and stared together at the giant coffin on top of the mountain peak. Gao Xianzi and Chen Chongchen were not far behind Guhai, their faces unsightly, not uttering a word. Both of them understood that they could not intervene at all. The Bodhisattva of merciful life stood high in the sky, hands clasped together as he stared at the divine coffin. In the distance, the Grand Elder and the sickly young man also stared at the divine coffin in death. At this moment, the god coffin shrouded in white mist had become the center of attention for everyone, and everything stopped, waiting for the outcome. Guhai looked at the divine coffin shrouded in white mist. His fists were clenched at this moment. His face was very ugly. "It's me who isn't strong enough. Once again. Guhai reddened his eyes amidst muttering to himself. Boom! There was a loud bang in the steep white mist, and the divine coffin in the white mist could be vaguely seen bursting apart. However, the divine coffin did not explode out, but rather seemed to explode into rolling purple aura in general, sweeping in all directions with a bang. Boom! A wave of aura swept through, and everyone around the mountain peak was placed in a vortex of aura. In the distance, the sickly young man covered his mouth with a handkerchief. Cough, cough, cough. A divine coughing condensed by the spirit mother's chi, used to nourish the physical body. Oh, it's really extravagant. The spirit mother's chi rushed straight towards Gao Xianzi, Chen Chongchen, and Guhai. Boom! The rolling spiritual chi was incredibly dense, drilling into Guhai's body in an instant. It was as if it was trying to catalyze Guhai's cultivation to increase. Guhai gritted his teeth. His gaze was cold, and he repelled this aura with all his might. Not far away, the great brightness king god steeply looked at Guhai in surprise as he noticed the abnormality. Boom, boom. Gao Xianzi and Chen Chongchen's cultivation realms broke through, bulging out a wave of air. The expressions of the two of them, they didn't know whether they were happy or sad. However, Guhai did not. The spirit mother's chi was exactly what Guhai needed, yet Guhai did not absorb it at all. Guhai, what are you doing? The Nuwa queen is reborn, the gift of the broken coffin, yet you don't take it in. The great brightness king god was puzzled. Guhai looked at the great brightness king god and said in a cold voice, "This is the reward in exchange for Xiaoru's death. Although I, Guhai, am in dire need of spirit mother's chi, I will never accept it. I will never forget today's shame." Humph! Xiaoru was already dead earlier. You only locked her 3 souls. The great brightness king god let out a cold snort. Guhai, however, no longer paid attention. Not far away, Gao Xianzi's face changed, and she stopped absorbing aura at once. Chen Chongchen looked at Guhai, and after a moment of entanglement, he also stopped absorbing aura. Boom! With a loud bang, the surrounding spiritual chi suddenly burst apart, and the rolling white mist steeply condensed into white clouds. Whew! Above the white cloud, light shone brightly, slowly lifting up a woman. It was the face in the coffin from earlier. The upper half of her body was in the shape of a woman, while the lower half of her body was a long serpentine tail. The woman closed her eyes. A colorful light emanated from her body, setting it off beautifully. Slowly, the woman opened her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, it was as if the best light in heaven and earth illuminated everyone's heart. Countless cultivators suddenly stuttered in their breath and looked at that stunning face in surprise. The upper body was extremely voluptuous and beautiful, with long and slender arms. Wearing a gorgeous tunic, Even if the waist was below the snake's tail, it still made the faces of many cultivators blush. "Xiaoru," Gu Hai called out. The woman twisted her head to look. Her eyes had long since stopped resembling Xiaoru's innocence. A hint of seductive light flooded her eyes, a cold smile crossing the corner of her mouth. It did not pay any attention to Gu Hai. "Congratulations to Empress Nuwa. Congratulations to Empress Nuwa on her rebirth." The crowd of sun-black-robed men respectfully paid their respects. Empress Wa turned her head, looked at the surrounding sun-black-robed men, and a cold light glowed in her eyes as she said, "A bunch of losers." The crowd of sun-black-robed men all lowered their heads, not daring to retort. "Congratulations to Empress Nuwa." The Great Brightness King God also bowed to Empress Nuwa. Empress Nuwa looked at the Great Brightness King God and sneered. "Great Brightness King God, you are quite bold, aren't you? Earlier, when Mengtai forced my reincarnation to kill me, you had the ability to perform a rescue, yet you waited until my reincarnation was dead before making your move. Queen Nuwa needs to be reborn. Queen Nuwa's reincarnation must die, but my subordinate is to blame for not saving it. But it's better than the blame of forcing it to be killed," the Great Brightness King God solemnly said. In the eyes of the Great Brightness King God, Xiaoru must die. It's just a matter of choosing whether to die in his own hands or in the hands of Mengtai. It's true that he could have saved Xiaoru earlier, but if he saved and then killed her, Nuwa whose cynicism would surely be even greater. The lesser of two evils. That was why the Great Brightness King God had been waiting for Mengtai before. "Good, very good." Queen Nuwa coldly glanced at the Great Ming King God. "Empress Nuwa, the Lord is about to leave the gate, so please go back early and preside over the situation," the Great Brightness King God respectfully said. HMPH. Empress Nuwa let out a cold snort. A group of sun-black-robed men to the side immediately rose, and one of them probed his hand, and a huge flying boat steeply appeared in the void. The flying boat was countless times larger and finer than Long Wanqing's white cloud, and the palace above it was also much more massive. "Empress Wa, please," the crowd of sun-black-robed men respectfully said. The clouds underneath Nuwa Who held Nuwa Who as she slowly flew onto the flying boat. "Hulo." The group of sun-black-robed men all followed respectfully at once, and the huge flying boat slowly flew up. Throughout, Empress Nuwa didn't even look at Gu Hai's group one more time. When Gu Hai looked at Empress Wa's expression, he knew that it was indeed not a person anymore. That lofty expression, how could Xiaoru learn it? "Empress Nuwa, shall we depart?" a sun-black-robed man respectfully said. Landing on top of the flying boat, Empress Nuwa coldly glanced at the Great Brightness King God. "What, Great Brightness King God, aren't you leaving?" Empress Nuwa said in a cold voice. "My subordinate still has things to take care of. Empress Nuwa will go ahead and my subordinate will soon catch up," the Great Brightness King God respectfully said. "Kill Gu Hai." Empress Nuwa coldly looked at the Great Brightness King God. Not far away, Gao Xianzi and Chen Chonchen all changed their faces. Gu Hai also looked at Empress Nuwa with a frown. The Great Brightness King God was silent for a moment and didn't object as he nodded and said, "Yes, as a precaution." Empress Nuwa steeply narrowed her eyes, but the surrounding void was steeply chilled, and large amounts of frost and snow appeared out of thin air. Countless cultivators stared wide-eyed. "Impossible, this frost and snow. Is it caused by the cold air in Empress Wa's eyes?" "Keep your voice down. Empress Wa can hear you." Countless horrified voices came from all around. "To prevent future problems. I'd like to ask, what kind of future trouble?" Queen Nuwa said in a cold voice. The Great Brightness King God was silent for a moment. "It's the Lord's explanation." "Ha ha 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 ha, little peacock, you really have a lot of guts. You're even starting to make decisions for me." "Ha." Nuwa's gaze was icy cold as she said. "Subordinate doesn't dare." The Great Brightness King God lowered his head. "You don't dare. I see that you dare." Do you want me to give up the Taiwan Palace and let you be the master? There was a piercing coldness in Empress Nuwa's voice. A powerful killing aura rushed straight towards the great brightness king god. Ka 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 ka. The crowd of sun-black-robed people knelt down under this killing aura, but no one dared to plead for mercy for the great brightness king god. The great brightness king god also steeply knelt down on one knee. Subordinate doesn't dare. It's best if you don't dare. It's not your turn to make amends for me, and you're not qualified to make amends for me. Remember. Empress's gaze was cold as she stared at the great brightness king god. Yes, the great brightness king god respectfully said. Go pull the cart in front. Empress Nuwa said in a cold voice. Yes, the great brightness king god didn't dare to refute and answered. Ming. Steeply, the great brightness king god's figure changed, transforming into 100 feet huge peacock. The peacock's wings spread out, steeply setting off a monstrous storm in general. Countless green lights flared out in all directions. The storm swept through, and countless cultivators' cloud beasts instantly fell to the east and west, as if collapsing at any time. A long song, 100 Zhong peacock, flew to the flying boat before. Drag the flying boat, slowly fly up to the sky. As the flying boat flew, Ren Shengbo Dissolver, the distant Grand Elder, no one opened their mouths to call out, as if none of them were qualified to have an equal dialogue with Empress War. Gu Hai let out a long sigh. He watched the flying boat slowly fly high into the sky towards the exit of the innate remnant realm. Empress War. Hair. Gu Hai revealed a bitter smile. The flying boat flew by. No one in the four directions dared to stop it. Seeing the flying boat flying, the cloud beasts quickly dodged. Those who couldn't, in the midst of 100 feet peacock's wings. Suddenly the cloud beasts collapsed, and the cultivators on the cloud beasts suddenly fell down, letting out miserable screams, and crashed into the earth. Everyone watched this Nuwa queen leave. Peacock dragged the flying boat and flew to a place not far from the exit of the center. Steeply, from above the flying boat, it seemed as if a huge snake-tailed shadow emerged. With a length of 1,000 feet, a huge snake-tail shadow slapped against the void in the air. Boom! The serpent tail slapped at the void, and instead of slapping the air, it was as if it had slapped on top of the water, and a ripple suddenly radiated from the void in all directions. Rumble. As the ripples in the void passed by, countless mountain peaks all instantly collapsed and fell. A huge tremor that made the entire small world shake in general. Gu Hai, however, was in the place of the void ripples, as if he saw a silhouette. Who? An eerie cold cry came from the void. However, Empress Nuwa no longer paid attention to the cold cry, and with the peacock dragging the flying boat, she slowly flew into that foggy area, crossed out of the innate remnant realm, and disappeared in front of everyone. Empress Nuwa has startled the unborn. Not far away in the void, the 9th Duke's face changed. The unborn. Gu Hai also seemed to have guessed something. The last thing that Empress Nuwa did was to help the helmsman find the unliving man. Gao Xianzi's eyes lit up and said, "Buzz." The ripples slowly subsided, and the figure in the ripples suddenly disappeared. Rumble. Gu Hai maneuvered his thousands of troops and horses, rushing high into the sky once again, and soon, once again occupying the land of the 100 longevity peach tree, overlooking the cloud beasts in all directions. But at this moment, a group of cultivators no longer wanted to go and make a break for it. The scene just now was too shocking. Gu Hai's face abruptly turned cold. "Helmsman, what's wrong?" Gao Xianzi was puzzled. "Meng Tai, what a life. He was cut off at the waist by the great Ming King God, and he didn't even die. Take him down for me." Gu Hai's eyes glared as he pointed at a bloodied figure in the mountains and forests below.